Leech Seed, Calyrex Ice Rider, and Miraidon just won the Utrect Regional Championships. Let's talk about it. Hello everyone, this is VGC Mike, back again to talk about more Regulation I content. So today we're going to talk about the Regional Championships for Utrect. This was also labeled a Special Championships, I believe they titled it. If you don't know, those are literally the same thing as far as championship points and everything are concerned. Same level of competition and same championship points payout. So this is their top 8. We're going to take a look at each one of these teams, but just taking a quick overview. Miraidon was very present once again, not quite as heavily as last time, but it's still showing on 5 of the top 8 teams. And all in all, this is a little similar to what we saw last time, but I guess the big takeaway is that Lunala is not the #1 partner for Miraidon anymore. It is Calyrex Ice, or at least where the meta was in this moment. We do have one combo of Miraidon and Lunala in the top 8 in 7th. Last time we looked at a regional, huge numbers for Lunala Miraidon. So let's take a look at the tournament overall. So looking at our day 1 usage of restricted Pokemon, this is the individual Pokemon, not the combinations. We have Miraidon as our #1 used Pokemon. We have Lunala in 2nd place, Cali Shadow, Cali Ice, Miraidon, Zamazenta, Kyogre, which is increased in usage a little bit because it gives Miraidon a little bit of a run for his money, challenging that Sun setup. It's also good into Pokemon like Miraidon and also good into Cali Ice on a one-on-one basis just because he resists Glacial Lance. And then once we move over to day 2, a couple things are the same, a couple things are different. So Miraidon increased from 43.3% to 52.8%, which is pretty significant because he was already very dominant and overrepresented in the day 1 usage to begin with. We have Lunala staying about the same from 27.9 to 28.1, but it is no longer in the 2nd place spot, it's in the 3rd place spot. Cali Shadow actually jumped ahead from 25.8% to 29.2%. So Cali Shadow did good this regional. We've talked about this before, but in the past when Cali Shadow usually does badly, it's because everyone is extra prepared for it. And if you're extra prepared for Cali Shadow usually has a really bad time. So this time things are a little bit more balanced. You know, Lunala and Miraidon had a crazy showing last time. People have to prepare for that now, and you can only prepare for so much on a single team. 4th place is Zamazenta, who also jumped up from 16.5% to 20.2%. My opinion, that probably is a combination of the Cali Shadow Zama teams being able to do better, and a couple other teams like the Zamazenta Miraidon teams running around. But yeah, I'd say that's kind of tied to that Cali Shadow increase, more or less. Then we have Cali Ice, who did about the same as day 1, 19% to 20.2%, though he did win the tournament overall. Kyogre going from 11.7 to 11.2, so it dipped down a little bit, but he's actually moving up a placement, so did fine there. And Terrapagos jumps into 7th place. Wasn't even on the day 1 usage as far as the top 8 was concerned, but did very solid day 2. We don't know exactly how well he was doing on day 1, but the fact that he wasn't there at all and is, jumping ahead to the 7th place is great. And then Miraidon moving down to the 8th place slot and going from 18.5 to 10.1. Pretty bad conversion there for Miraidon, probably because of the Miraidons running around. I'd have to take a look at exactly how a lot of these Miraidon teams were built, and we probably don't have a lot of information on some of the day 1s that got knocked off in general. It would be interesting to see what approach they were taking for Miraidon to have him do kind of so badly overall. And then Ho-Oh also gets knocked off of the top 8, so probably as a extension of that Kyogre increase, giving him a bit of an issue, and the Miraidons running around like crazy. So usually you pair Ho-Oh with something that does decent into Miraidon, but a lot of the times that is Miraidon itself. So if you're using Miraidon Ho-Oh and there's a lot of Miraidons running around, if they're able to get rid of your Miraidon, now Ho-Oh is not looking so good. I mean, he can always Terra Grass, but forcing Terra is still usually part of the game plan for taking down one of the Pokemon. So just because he has a Terra that can resist Miraidon's electric attacks, that means that Ho-Oh is forced to use the Terra, or if you force a Terra out of something else, that Ho-Oh is just going to lose. So probably why Ho-Oh is not looking so hot right now. And then for our day 2, our most common Pokemon pairings overall are Lunala Miraidon. Still pretty represented there. Definitely carrying over that high from the last competition. You know, ironic that they only had one in the top 8, even though it was so popular in day 2. Cali Shadow Zama, second most popular pairing. We're going to talk about this too, but I think we're kind of coming full circle with Regulation I. I'm sure we're going to get some other teams and developments happening, but right now it almost feels like we have this, it's almost like a rock, paper, scissors thing, where Cali Shadow Zama was the most dominant team. Going into the first regional, Lunala Miraidon was able to counter that team very heavily, as well as teams like Koraidon Lunala. And then looking at what happened with this team, or with this regional, Leech Seed Cali Ice plus Miraidon seemed to be able to counter Lunala Miraidon very easily, or at least well enough to where they can win those matchups very consistently. And then based on the winner, Michael Kelsch's own words, the Cali Shadow plus Zama team is actually a very hard matchup for the Cali Ice Miraidon team. So this top 3 actually looks like a little bit of a rock, paper, scissors situation. And then you have a couple other teams that don't really fit into this rock, paper, scissors scenario, but are still plenty good and kind of are maybe weak into one of these, but not into the others in a way that fits that narrative. So you have like the Cali Shadow Terrapagos team, which seems like it's just very consistent and solid. I think we're going to see this team just kind of stick around. I think it's funny that we have one in the top 8 for both regionals, and it's never really fitting into the storyline. I don't even think we ever really get to see it featured on stream really, but it's not going anywhere, and it seems like it's always going to be solid. And the more Zamazenta is not doing well, the better this team will be doing, unless you figure out such a core that Zamazenta really does become useless, which is not usually the case. Usually you really do have to play around it pretty heavily. But this team I don't think is going anywhere. I do think we're going to see a variant of a Koraidon team. I do think people need to be, kind of reconsidering it. I think I said this in my last tournament, but I think the last tournament showed that the Lunala Miraidon team is the way to go if you want to use Ursaluna. And the Lunala Koraidon teams right now, if you want to play Ursaluna, you might as well be using the Miraidon over the Koraidon. So if you're going to use Koraidon, I think you figure something else out. Not saying it's not super good. It obviously did really good last regional, but right now it just seems like the inferior way to play the Ursaluna teams. And then looking at the non-legendary or the non-restricted legendary Pokemon, this is our day 1 usage. We've got Incineroar, Urshifu, Iron Hands, all the top 3. And then moving over to our day 2 for comparison, Incineroar, absolutely dominant, 55.1% of day 2 teams. So he is just a monster there. Now, I will say some of these Pokemon, it's worth keeping in mind that some of these Pokemon can fall off or increase based on them being attached to a certain restricted pairing that's doing well. So last time we saw like Rillaboom not doing so hot. It's doing fine now, but that was also because most of the teams that were using Rillaboom were the Cali Shadow Zama teams, which did not have a good showing that tournament. So that can skew these numbers pretty heavily, where you might see a Pokemon doing pretty bad, but that also could just be completely because of the fact that they're usually associated with one archetype, and that archetype didn't do well. So these numbers are helpful, but in general, I wouldn't necessarily take too much out of them unless there's something really noticeable, like the big increase in the Incineroar and Urshifu numbers here. I mean, Incineroar is just really good. That's nothing new, and I'm sure nobody's surprised to see it. And yeah, like for example, Fluttermane falls off the map altogether. Obviously Fluttermane's good, but I would bet you that the teams using Fluttermane were mostly the Calyrex teams, and Calyrex didn't do well. So that doesn't mean Fluttermane did bad, that just means that the Calyrex teams were doing bad, in my opinion. So let's take a look at the top 8 teams overall. We have the winner, Calyrex, using Leech Seed. The idea behind the Leech Seed is basically that Lunala being very popular and using Wide Guard. There's other Wide Guard Pokemon, of course, too. Lunala with Electric Seed, or a Wide Guard Pokemon that has high defense like Zamazenta, can kind of wall Calyrex, even if he has a secondary move like High Horsepower. If it was close combat or something, obviously Lunala walls it even harder. But if you use Leech Seed and you have Protect, he's got leftovers as well, you can kind of stall that out pretty easily. You even have Grimmsnarl to help put up like Reflector Light Screen if you need to play this Leech Seed stall game a little bit more proactively. And yeah, and then you have Trick Room sweepers like Urshifu with Choice Band. You can play out of the Trick Room with your Miraidon and Landorus, which is pretty fast. Landorus has Taunt, which is really cool. I actually didn't even know he learned that. That's an awesome tech. I might put that in my back pocket for certain teams in the future, because I think Taunt's really good right now, honestly. Especially with how much Amoonguss is running around. Now, a lot of Amoongusses do run Mental Herb, so maybe that isn't the best way to counter Amoonguss overall, but I do think Taunt's really good right now. And the other thing is that on stream we saw this Incineroar that is being used with the Assault Vest is very, very fast. So we actually saw it outspeed Ho-Oh. And because Ho-Oh is a legendary Pokemon, his base stats, even if you have like a min speed Ho-Oh, like yes, he can get relatively slow, but usually the legendary Pokemon, except for the like Calyrex Ice, if their min speed can only get so slow. Like a lot of people associate Lunala with Trick Room, but Lunala actually isn't even that slow, even if you run at min speed. So Incineroar was outspeeding Ho-Oh, who's usually going to be like decently fast anyway, because if you set Tailwind, you want to be able to like outspeed Cali Shadow usually, I would say. But this Incineroar was outspeeding Ho-Oh. It was also outspeeding Rillabooms on stream. So I think this Incineroar, the way this team is composed, you want to be able to either fake out Rillaboom's turn 1 or fake out opposing Incineroar's turn 1s to get a Trick Room up or something like that. And then I'm sure you're not going to complain when you're, outspeeding things like Ho-Ohs and things like that with your Incineroar either. This was a good meta call overall. We'll have to see in the next regional if this is something that sticks around or if there's another adaptation to this now that we have multiple strong teams that are kind of entering the mix. And I'm just going to jump over past the second place team for a second. And the third place team was actually a player that in the same play group as the first player and same team. So this team actually took first and third. So clearly very strong. Now going back to our second place team, what I think is funny about this is actually the team that won the first Victory Road for the most part. Same 6. The Incineroar has Helping Hand, which is probably the biggest thing that changes the matchup a bit. So with Helping Hand Incineroar, if you have a Nasty Plot up, and in some cases I think you don't even need the Nasty Plot up, Cali Shadow plus Life Orb can just deal insane damage. The other core Pokemon here, obviously Zamazenta gives you Wide Guard, and Body Press has a very good type synergy offensively with Ghost attacks, Astral Barrage, because everything that one resists or is immune to, the other one can hit for super effective. Then the other 3 are just good at either redirection, fake out cycling, or hitting things really hard for Urshifu Rapid Strike. So this team, I think if we've been following the format, you know this is a team that you have to watch out for. I think some of us were maybe considering this maybe like being an early meta team only, but it turns out that this team is good and it is going to stick around. And I think it's just a matter of what team is the most popular in the moment, how much we'll see of it or not. Okay, and misspoke a little bit earlier. The first and the fourth place team were actually the same. The third place team, for whatever reason, the website that I'm using does not have the graphic for the third place team. So I don't have the full details on this team, unfortunately, but this was the Sneasler team. And it's unfortunate because this is probably the most unique team that we have up here as far as something new, other than maybe the Lunala Miraidon Entei team. And yeah, they're using Sneasler with Electric Seed. I do believe I saw that on stream. And Zamazenta Miraidon. Cool pairing. Not quite as much synergy as some of the other teams, but it must just have the right combination of things to do well in this scenario. It does have a very clearly defined Tailwind and Trick Room mode with the Tornadus and the Farigiraf setting the Trick Room. Zamazenta is kind of just a overall decent Pokemon, so Wide Guard support can obviously give you the edge in certain matchups against like Cali Ice and Cali Shadow. Now this team did lose to Cali Ice. It lost to the first place team, so the Leech Seed variant was enough to take this team down. But overall, you're going to have a better time against Cali Ice with your Miraidon if you don't have to worry about getting slammed with Glacial Lances. And then moving on to our 5th place team, we have a Ho-Oh Miraidon team. This is pretty similar to the team we were looking at in the last regional, but we don't have Iron Treads. And I believe we're using Urshifu Single Strike instead with the Focus Sash, which is cool. Urshifu, again, is a very popular Pokemon on teams that have Trick Room and Tailwind because his speed stat is not insanely fast, and if you run him Adamant and either max speed or generally high speed, he's going to be he'll outspeed pretty much everything in Tailwind. And if there's a lot of really fast Pokemon on the opposing team and you set Trick Room, he's going to outspeed a lot of things there. Obviously, he's not going to outspeed really fast things, but there's a lot of Pokemon that don't want to be in a Trick Room with an Urshifu. So definitely a strong contender for Trick Room Tailwind teams. And then other than that, this is, we have the core of Miraidon, Farigiraf with Electric Seed and Iron Hands, which is very popular and very strong. And then you have the Ho-Oh, which Sacred Fire and Electro Drift or Volt Switch, they just have very strong type synergy as well. So water Pokemon can't resist that type combination, and grass Pokemon can't resist that type combination. So just kind of a way of breaking through like Fire, Water, Grass cores and other type synergies that usually give some of these Pokemon problems. But other than that, Ho-Oh, overall, he had a kind of a harsh showing in the tournament, but one of these teams did sneak through, so I think the team still seems to be doing just fine. I'd be interested to see if the other teams were using Iron Bundle and Urshifu, and maybe that's the difference maker. Maybe you need these two right now. And then moving forward, we have our first Kyogre Zacian team. And this is our first one that we've seen do well pretty much in any of the major tournaments. And I think it was just the right timing for everything. So this team actually has of similarities to the Cali Ice team that Justin Tang won a regional with, I believe. We have the Roaring Moon and the Amoonguss with Covert Cloak and Urshifu, I know there was an Urshifu Rapid Strike on that team. I think it had Taunt as well. I think originally it had Safety Goggles, but maybe just not as relevant in this double restricted meta, so he's got the Focus Sash instead. And then Iron Hands probably helps your matchup into Miraidon, which Zacian is good into Miraidon if there's no Trick Room or anything set up, but if there is, Iron Hands is a lot better because he is very slow. He even underspeeds things like Cali Ice. So yeah, that just patches up your matchup there. Other than that, I already spoke about this earlier, but Kyogre is just kind of a good meta call for certain trends that were happening, with Koraidon being more popular and Ho-Oh being more popular than he usually is, and then Cali Ice as well being a pretty favorable matchup for Kyogre Zacian overall. And then Kyogre and Zacian just have very good type synergy, defensively and offensively, so Kyogre kind of protects Zacian's fire weakness, and he can also hit dragon types very hard, which water resists. Probably the biggest thing is that Zacian hits overall like a truck, but he can't hit fire types very hard at all with the combination of fire and steel, but Kyogre will just nuke those with either Origin Pulse or Water Spout in the rain. And then we have a Miraidon Lunala team, so this looks like kind of like the teams we were looking like before, but it just has an option to be very offensive. And you can accomplish that with, just setting Tailwind with the Whimsicott, and then Miraidon and Entei, they have the same type synergy with Sacred Fire and Electro Drift that Ho-Oh has. So I do admit that I dogged on Ho-Oh a little bit early on in Regulation I, and I was always saying that, if you want Ho-Oh, just use Entei, because Ho-Oh's main thing that he has going on is Sacred Fire. Turns out that being a flying type and having the fighting resist is actually pretty relevant right now, but this person basically ran with that same thought process of, if I want a Ho-Oh and I want to hit things with Sacred Fire, I'll just use Entei. And that way I get to use my Lunala as well. So offensively, you might as well use Entei. There's a lot of defensive reasons to use Ho-Oh though. And then other than that, this team does have an Urshifu with Focus Sash, which once again, even though Urshifu's not super fast, he's still very good on these teams that have Trick Room and Tailwind. You just have to identify which one the opponent's team isn't going to be able to handle as well. And then finally, we have Terrapagos and Calyrex Shadow Rider. And this is basically the way this team is run. This is another Encore Disable version of Cali Shadow. And then you have 2 Redirection users and 2 Fake Out users. So we won't go too hard on how this team is set up because we've seen it before. We saw it through all of Regulation G as well. And just had the Scream Tail there instead. But yeah, this team's solid. Turns out that this core, Terrapagos himself, is just very good. You kind of simplify the game plan as far as like what you're doing, and the only thing you have to watch out for is Terrapagos getting slammed with a super effective fighting attack. If you can avoid getting knocked out by that, you're fine. The only other thing that's really an issue is Snarl, because that can just kind of reduce Terrapagos' output. So really 2 main things that can counter Terrapagos very easily, but usually a team's only going to have 1, maybe 2 fighting type Pokemon. And some cases they don't even have that. So if that's the case, Terrapagos is going to have a good time. But that's the top 8. That's the tournament. Let me know what you guys think. I'll have more battle content coming to you very soon. If you have not seen, I've started doing live streams. I'm going to be doing more of those. Feel free to check them out on my page because the VODs are still active. But until then, happy battling.